Can an incumbent party win with numbers like this?
John, simply put, it would be historically unprecedented.
You could go cry later and blame us and Russia, but we just told you how to win the election. If you'd like to do that, go for it. If not, keep going down this path. It's humiliating to lose to Donald Trump, and they're getting their asses handed to them again now, for God's sake.
Just 28% of Americans think the US is on the right track. And I want you to put that into perspective, right? When does the average, when the incumbent party loses the election, look at that. It's just 25%. That looks a heck of a lot like that 28%, right?
That is not good news. And the person you just heard from, of course, is CNN's Harry Enton, breaking down what appears to be a pretty big problem for the Harris campaign, which is the electorate's clear displeasure with the direction that the country is headed in. Typically, the incumbent party suffers the consequences of that. And as you know, the incumbent party is the Democratic Party, with Kamala Harris serving as the vice president. In fact, Enton went so far as to say that if Harris won with those numbers, it would be historically unprecedented.
When the White House party wins, i.e. Kamala Harris's party, the Democrats, 42% on average think that the country is on the right track.
Can an incumbent party win with numbers like this?
Yeah, so if we look historically speaking, right, and we say, okay, say the US is on the right track, the incumbent party, when they win. Today, again, it's just 28%. Look throughout history, right? 96, 88, 04, 12, 84. In all of these instances, far more than 28% thought that the country was on the right track. 39 was the lowest back in 1996. We got upwards of 47% in 84. Of course, that was a blowout, right, for Ronald Reagan. So there is no historical precedent for the White House party winning another term in the White House when just 28% of the country thinks that we're on the right track. John, simply put, it would be historically unprecedented.
Now, Harris might have a slight advantage in that she's not Joe Biden, she's not the president, but I don't know how much of an advantage that really is, to be honest with you, Cenk. And I remember when I was getting my poli-sci degree, this was actually something that we learned in terms of American elections and American politics. We looked back at what tends to happen, and yeah, the electorate tends to retaliate against the party that's in charge if things aren't really going well in the country. Yeah. So I don't know how that's gonna play out for Harris, but I am curious what you think about how she's handled her campaigning in recent weeks, because there's been a pivot, and I'm not sure that pivot's working out for her.
Yeah, I think she's gonna lose the lead imminently, and then there's only a month left. So I'm super worried about the end of this election. So I'm gonna tell you why in a second. But that point he's making about is the country going in the right direction. This is one of the reasons why I was absolutely positive that Biden was going to lose. He is the actual incumbent. There's no way to trick anyone into thinking he wasn't the incumbent and he wasn't responsible for the direction that we were going in. So his popularity and approval ratings were in the low 30s, totally unrecoverable, never happened in American history. When a country's people think that it's going in the wrong direction at this level, the incumbent has no chance of winning. And so that's why at the end, right before he dropped it. By the way, now they're trying to do revisionist history. Even now, some of the Biden supporters, and they're like, oh, he would be where Kamala Harris is right now. He was down by 8. It's nationally, she's up by 5 to 7. It's a joke. They're insane people. So now, okay, but Kamala Harris isn't Biden, and so that gives us a complicated situation here, where we have an incumbent administration but not an incumbent candidate. So, well, then who wins? Well, I'll tell you, the person who frames it better wins. And in the beginning, Kamala Harris did a great job of framing it, and we told you that immediately. Somebody wrote in today saying, I can't keep up, guys. Sometimes you're criticizing Democrats and sometimes you're saying they're doing well. Yeah, because it depends, doesn't it? Are they doing well or are they doing poorly? So we actually do the news here. We don't just say, oh, our side, so she's definitely gonna win or he's definitely gonna win. So, and what was she doing so right back then? Tim Walz is a breath of fresh air, and it actually partly affects this conversation. Populist, progressive economic positions. Hey, we're now going to look out for you guys on price gouging, on the housing prices, and all these things that were populist economically that the country loved. She starts surging in the polls, and she framed it as, "Aren't you sick of what we had in this race? Well, good news, there's a new candidate and you get to have a whole new look at this thing, and you've got a candidate that'll give you a change from this election. So perfect framing, and guys, the way she took off was not a given. She did a terrific job in taking off.
No, the very beginning, that excitement around her was very real, and the messaging that she put out in the very beginning of her campaign, I believe, was successful because she provided excitement as a new candidate, of course, that's part of it. And there was a little bit of a honeymoon period, but she came out by naming Tim Walz as her running mate. Like, she was signaling that she was gonna moderate certain elements of the left-wing policy that is not so popular, but kind of focused on like the working class messaging that I like, especially when she chose Tim Walz. But then she did like a big pivot away from that. And not only was it a big pivot away from that, she then started talking about how honored she was to get the endorsement of some of the worst like war criminals in the country, like Dick Cheney. Why are you campaigning with neocons? I was thinking about this the other day. So she was campaigning in Wisconsin with Liz Cheney. And the idea is, well, if I campaign with a former Republican congresswoman, well, maybe she can convince some of the Republicans in the state to support me, right? That's the thinking. Except Liz Cheney lost re-election. And she lost re-election. Like, the Republicans in Wisconsin don't love Liz Cheney. Like, I don't understand what the real benefit is of campaigning with them. If they want to endorse her, there's nothing Kamala Harris can do about it. But it's something entirely different to decide, like, hey, I'm gonna go out and campaign with the Cheneys.
Yeah, so I wanna pick up on that in a second, because so when she's framing herself as a change candidate, two things that helped a lot that we just discussed. One is, hey, I'm changing the race. The race was Trump versus Biden. You hated that race. Now you got a whole new race and a whole new option. Beautifully framed. Hey, I picked Tim Walz. No one expected me to pick Tim Walz. Tim Walz is the most real looking out of all these guys. The least plastic, least fake.
The most liked.
The most liked. And so, and the fact that she picked a progressive who actually got some things done in Minnesota, people were shocked by that. And they're like, oh, okay, change. She wasn't kidding, she meant change.
Totally, yeah.
Right, and she goes after price gouging. We know that everyone in the business community and all the donors hate that kind of talk. We're like, okay, look at this, real change. But when she goes back to sending out all of her surrogates, Mark Cuban and the others all over cable news going, no, big business, don't worry. She's even more pro-corporations than Joe Biden was. You're like, ooh, that's not change. And then she goes and assures the military-industrial complex, don't worry, nothing has changed. I'm gonna support Israel 100%. I'm bringing in the neocons like the Cheneys. Don't worry, no change. But guys, she's making the mistake of thinking she's only talking to the donors, because that's who she talks to 24/7 in the real world of the campaigning, right? And all of her advisors, they're all donor obsessed. But the message you have for donors is the worst possible message to give to the American people, because they don't want any change. You know why? They're already at the top. So they don't want anything to change. That's why Biden's #1 promise behind the scenes was to the donors, nothing will fundamentally change. Now that she's poured the I'm not gonna change anything message out there, now you're gonna see her slipping in the polls and Trump leading. And guys, we're telling you ahead of time. So we're the only show that does that, so you can check our credibility with what, it's almost like a scientific experiment. Were we right or were we not? You'll see it with your own eyes. Saying that you're not the change candidate and that business and military interests can rest easy because nothing will change is a disastrous strategy. Turn around, turn around.
I have a feeling that part of the reason why she isn't turning around and that the reason why she moved off of that more populist messaging is because she took a look at the base that is most supportive of her campaign, and that base is not the non-college educated working class. Take a look.
White college grads have been this group that have been moving further and further to the left. All right, this is the Democratic margin among white college grads. Look, Hillary Clinton won by 5 points. Then Joe Biden won by 9. Look at this margin that Kamala Harris is pulling up in the polls right now among white college grads. It's an 18-point margin, double the margin that Joe Biden had just 4 years ago. I went back through the record books. This would be the largest win for a Democratic presidential candidate among white college grads in recorded history. How about all voters with a college degree? It's basically the same story. It's historically high support for a Democratic candidate. You see right now, Kamala Harris leads in the polls by 21 points. That's 3 points higher than Joe Biden did 4 years ago. At 6 points higher than Hillary Clinton did 8 years ago.
How many voters do have a college degree?
Right. So this is the second part, the key nugget here. An increasing share of the electorate. You know, you go back 44 years ago, just 21% of the electorate had a college degree. You go back 24 years ago, 31%. You go back 4 years ago, you're up to 40%. This year, it looks like a historically high proportion of the electorate, 41% will have a college degree.
Now, one could argue that the increase of college-educated voters in the Democratic Party has to do with the efforts to cancel student loan debt. You know, that's a possibility. But the other thing is, you know, individuals who have graduated from college are far more likely to be affluent. And so a lot of her messaging has, in my opinion, kind of shifted over to appealing toward more affluent Americans.
So yes and no. So it's a little bit more complicated than that because the very richest people in the country disproportionately support Trump. Because to them, they think, no, Trump's exactly like us and they identify with him. Take everything, leave nothing behind, okay? And so whereas the upper middle class, the highly educated, they want the calmness of the establishment, if I'm being honest, okay? And so for a lot of their lives are going okay. And so they think, I don't want too much change. And so the Republicans used to be the party of the establishment. Unfortunately, Democrats have now become a little bit more. They both are, but the Democrats maybe even a little bit more the party of the establishment. Now, to be fair to the college educated, and you know, obviously we went to college here, so we don't hate ourselves. Of course I like college educated people, right? And one of the things that's driving them towards Kamala Harris is that Donald Trump won't stop lying. And college educated people know those are not facts. Sorry, they're just not true, right? And so it bothers people with an education when you make things up 24/7 and they think this guy's kind of a madman. And it's hard to trust a guy like this. That's not the interesting part. I think the interesting part is that the non-college educated that used to be in the Democratic Party have gone over to the Republican Party. And that one is not because, oh, they hate facts and they, et cetera. No, they realize the mainstream media is lying in a lot of ways. It's more complicated than that. The reason they're going over there is because they think the establishment gives me nothing. Everything goes to the top. Nothing ever comes to the middle class. Nothing ever comes down to the great majority of American people. And so I'm tired of it. So whoever looks more establishment, I'm gonna vote against them. And I don't care who's on the other side. I'm voting against you guys. They're super clear about that whenever you ask. But the people in media, they're all college educated. So they can't relate to those other voters.
That's very true, yeah.
And literally in 2 different articles I read today, there were quotes from people going, I'm mystified. I can't figure this phenomenon out at all. Why are the non-college educated going in that direction? Why do they like what Trump is saying? It's because they don't like you. But they can't ever see that because it's about them. They're blinded by their bias. They can't fathom that the establishment is cheating in favor of certain classes of people.
Yeah.
That the donor money is affecting where our resources and our taxes go. The non-college educated people aren't wrong about that. They're right about that. That is the fundamental truth that they understand. And unfortunately, people in the upper brackets don't understand because it's inconvenient for them to understand it. That's why they're blinding themselves to that fact. But if you blind yourself enough, you lose an election because you couldn't see reality. That's what happened in 2016, and I'm now very worried that's the direction we're going right now.
If anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Oh boy. Okay, we're doing an instant poll in the chat right now. Okay, should Kamala Harris do more interviews or no? Because that's a terrible answer. So there's a whole drama as to whether she should have answered that. Later she went back to amended, hold for that. And then I'm going to weigh in on whether I think she should keep doing these interviews or not. Back to you, Anna.
Well, Kamala Harris has been doing more interviews, and to be fair, she's been urged to do more interviews, and that might be one of the few things that she's been listening to, so credit where credit is due on that. However, during her appearance on The View, she did what she seemed to want to not do, which is distance herself from Joe Biden. Instead, she decided to say that, no, I'm totally in line with everything Joe Biden has done. And it's a bizarre move because according to a recent CNN report, her campaign team is well aware that anything having to do with Biden is extremely unpopular with voters at the moment. Now, we're going to get back to that report in a second, and it's important to know the details of that. But before we do, let's hear more of what Kamala Harris has to say about the Biden administration.
The work that we have done, for example, capping the cost of insulin at $35 a month for our seniors is something I care deeply about allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices.
Yes.
And bring the cost of prescription medication down for seniors, but my intention is to expand that for all Americans. The work we have done to invest in American industries, whether it be in terms of manufacturing and creating almost 800,000 new jobs around manufacturing. Those are all a shared priority.
So let me just say, while I think that it is definitely risky to tie yourself to policies that were implemented by Biden, there are policies implemented by Biden that are popular. And so I like that she decided to focus on the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, right? She focused on the right things. Now, had she decided to instead focus on sending tens of billions of dollars in military funding to Israel or hundreds of billions of dollars in military funding to Ukraine, that kind of stuff, or if she touted the Biden administration's immigration policy, which whether you are in favor of his policies or not, they are not polling well. If she attached herself to that, that would hurt her politically, big time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But at least she focused on the right issues.
Yeah. Oh, look at that poll moving live. I love that. Okay, so keep voting in the poll move as we go.
Let's put up the split screen.
Yeah, there it is. Okay.
Interesting.
So I'm going to weigh in on the poll in a second, but first let's keep going about this. Look, we're going to give you the debate in a second as to whether what direction she should go on staying with Biden and say, yeah, I'm proud to be with Biden, or starting to create distance between herself and Biden. So that's a different question than whether she should do interviews. In that question, I say, stay away from Biden. Biden is not a popular person. So I hate to break the hearts of Democrats, but if you would like to beat Donald Trump, please do rational things and not just things that appease powerful Democrats. That's for another day when we're not trying to win a national election. That's for like your feelings, and you want to do rosé all day at another time and go to brunch and mop up Biden's tears. But right now, number one, you look like you're not the change candidate, which you desperately need to be if you want to win this race, if you stick very close to Joe Biden. Number two, he has some unpopular policies that then get stuck onto you. And rhetorically, you want to be a fresh new thing, not, oh yeah, I would have done the same thing as Biden for the last 4 years. I don't know if you know this, Biden's not in the race anymore. And his health and his mental deterioration is a part of it, but also he wasn't gonna win.
Right.
Because right now, only about a quarter of Americans think we're going on the right path. So if you're gonna do interviews, which here, I'll give you a teaser, I think she should, you have got to get a better handle on this issue. You've got to have a terrific answer for, here's what I agree with Joe Biden on and I'm proud of, right? We lowered drug prices. Where the hell are Republicans in lowering drug prices? And here's the parts I do not agree with Joe Biden. And in Washington, I know that that's a giant crime.
That's never gonna happen. Joe.
Right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, saying you would disagree with a Democratic president. Guys, this isn't time for your stupid little club and you guys all patting each other on the ass. Go, oh, we love Joe, we're so on the in. This is time to win.
So oftentimes, like, you'll refer to people like Trump as like a blunt instrument, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're good at recognizing blunt instruments because I think you yourself are a blunt instrument.
Damn right I
He
am.
is. Okay, so look, overall agree with what you're saying, but I do think that the framing and the tone is everything, because there are plenty of voters within the Democratic base who love Joe Biden and would not take kindly to Kamala Harris being as aggressive as you were in the way that you framed that and the way that you said it, right? But I do agree with you that when it comes to the unpopular policies that were implemented or the failures of the Biden administration, she should try to distance herself.
But Anna, look here, let me make one more counter argument, because the Biden lovers have a 0% chance of not voting for Kamala Harris.
You never know.
No. I mean, 7 of them will stay home. If she spat in his face, 7 of them would stay home, and only 7. You know why? Because they're diehards. They hate Trump. They're never gonna move over Trump. And remember, they follow the current Democratic leader no matter what. He could come out and be like, oh, I finally defeated America. And they'll be like, hey, he's young, he's 25. He's 25, he's dynamic, okay? He's the best possible candidate we have. Those guys are not going to vote against the Democratic leader, no matter what Kamala Harris says. So for God's sake, go get the undecideds who, I hate to break it to you, don't love Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And that is the reason why internally over at the Harris campaign, things are happening, guys. Things are happening. So CNN reports that internal Harris campaign research on the September presidential debate found that one of the most popular moments for the vice president was when she said, clearly, I'm not Joe Biden.
Read a poll, brothers and sisters.
Okay.
Of course, that's the most popular. Now you know it's the most popular. Please read a poll.
There's more. In mid-September, the Democratic Research and Polling Initiative Blueprint conducted a national poll testing a long series of potential statements Harris could make about herself and Biden. Those that performed best, the polling found, were those that displayed a clear break between her and Biden, while those that performed worst were those that portrayed a future Harris administration as building on the accomplishments of the Biden era. Any mention of Biden, the polling found, led to less support. That's interesting. Even if the position it had Harris taking was the same, those numbers have made their way around Harris aides. So they're looking at that poll and they're trying to do the distancing. But clearly, during her interview with The View, she failed to do the distancing. And so, look, it's not just about The View. She does, in my opinion, still struggle a little bit in these interviews, but who knows? Maybe she'll get better at it. Maybe she'll get more practice. There's gonna be fumbles here and there. But the main point is that people are still getting to know Kamala Harris. So whether you like it or not, whether we like it or not, whether she likes it or not, she's gonna have to do more interviews. But she's got to remember, what kind of messaging resonates most with the voters who are getting to know her. And so I guess associating with the Biden administration, even though she is VP, not a popular move to make.
Yeah, so look, the reason why I say do more interviews is because, you're gonna get missteps. Even if you're a great politician, you're gonna have missteps from now and then. And in fact, I think Tim Walz is a super popular guy, borderline great politician. Why do I say great politician? Not because of his rhetoric, but because he actually got things done in Minnesota. And if you're a right winger and you don't like Tim Walz and you don't like the things that he got done, that's fine, but he got them done, and you can't argue with that. He got all those bills passed, so that's why he knows what he's doing. But even he, in the middle of the debate, had to quote him, a knucklehead moment, right? And so, and he should have had a better answer prepared for that, and he shouldn't have fibbed about when he was in China, etc. Right? So, but people don't remember like all of your little missteps, especially if you flood the zone. And there's 2 great examples of this. The first was Charles Barkley. So my whole life, Charles Barkley would say amazing, outrageous things. Now I love nearly all of them, even the ones I disagreed with, because I thought, we're having fun. At least this guy's got a personality, etc. But by the end, everybody loved Charles. You know why? And did everybody agree with 100% of what he said? That's impossible, right? But they appreciated the guy. They're like, okay, he's real and he's honest, etc. Right? Now that's a good example. The bad example, but it's still true, is Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, oh my God, he floods the zone with insanity day after day after day. You can't possibly remember. We play Trump brackets where we have all the 64 worst things he's done. We'll play it later today, right? But like the one that always sticks out for me is when he said that nobody can do anything about the judges that Hillary Clinton appoints if she wins back in 2016, except the Second Amendment guys, they could do something. I mean, that is directly asking for those judges to be killed. And so there's no, Second Amendment doesn't have flowers and unicorns, it has guns, okay? So, but nobody remembers because he said 2,000 crazy things since then, including, the audience in the live debate went crazy for me. There was no audience. He's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. He often goes on rants about how he's gonna beat Biden. We're like totally, New York Times had a giant write-up about this. Half of their examples I didn't love, it was just normal crazy Trump. But the other half were devastating, man. He keeps saying things where I go, oh my God, he sounds like Joe Biden.
I know, so look, I think what he was referring to with the audience, debate audience, was the online audience.
No. I've now looked, I hear you, Anna, because you said that last time, I looked into it and quadruple checked it. Okay, I rewatched the tape 3 different times. There was no audience. He wasn't saying, hey, he wasn't making a reference to the polls, which would also not be true, but at least more believable. He wasn't talking about the reaction he got online. He was talking about the audience because he said, I said this and then a crowd went crazy. No, he's losing it. I mean, he was already nuts. But I mean, look, here the already nuts part is when he said Kamala Harris isn't even having campaign rallies or no one's showing up. It's all AI images, right? Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. If you believe that, then you're like the Biden guys on the Democratic side. You'll believe anything from Trump and you'll vote for Trump because you don't mind insanity, right?
Yeah.
But these things, my point is that Trump is still getting his message out. And what's his core message? The blunt instrument we talked about, which is I'm for you guys and I'm fighting for you guys. And the establishment hates me. Don't you hate the establishment? I'm against the establishment. And through all the insanity and the mental decline and all of that, people are getting his core message. Kamala Harris has to deliver her core message, whatever she thinks is the most winning message she has. You cannot give away hundreds of millions and maybe even billions of dollars in free media. You should be doing 3, 4, 8 interviews a day. Tim Walz should be doing even more. And then nobody's gonna remember that you said that you were just like Joe Biden. Nobody's gonna remember any of your missteps. They're just gonna remember it overall. Look at that, you see my position now winning 74-26. Okay, I love doing these live. Thank you for voting, guys.
All right, let me finish this. Let's go back to Biden, okay? Because so we know how the polling is when Kamala Harris attaches herself or associates with the Biden administration. And this has created some pretty awkward interactions between the Harris campaign and also the Biden White House. So as CNN reports, in September, Harris responded to the Federal Reserve's interest rate cut with a statement about how much more work needs to be done. Then her aides had to spend hours negotiating with their White House counterparts to scale back a victory lap speech Biden planned to give the next day, according to a person familiar with the matter. And complicating this issue even further is Biden himself, who did not do Harris any favors when he said this last week, quote, Harris was a major player in everything we've done, including the passage of legislation, which we were told we could never pass. She's been, and her staff is interlocked with mine in terms of all the things we're doing. However, later in the show, Harris did think of one thing she would do differently than Joe Biden. Let's take a look.
Listen, I plan on having a Republican in my cabinet.
I got a list.
Yes, right. You asked me what's the difference between Joe Biden and me. Well, that will be one of the differences. I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet because I don't feel burdened by letting pride get in the way of a good idea.
When she says that she'll appoint a Republican, think about the types of Republicans that have been supportive of her campaign. They're neocons. Please don't put neocons in your cabinet. Please, if you get elected, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Everyone hates the neocons.
Okay.
Everyone.
Let me break down why they're fundamentally wrong about the direction that they're going in when they do this strategy. So what's the strategy? The strategy is, we got to win Republicans in the suburbs, and if we can just get the 12 Republicans who claim they're not voting for Trump, then we'll win the election because of how close it is in the swing states. And so they keep going towards traditional Republicans,
neocons,
like the Cheneys. But the traditional Republicans have 2 giant problems and why they're the wrong direction to go in. Number one, they love war, and the country does not want war undecideds, independents don't want war, nobody wants war except the people in Washington, okay? So that is an unpopular idea. You might say, oh, I love war, and please, let's fight 7 more wars for Israel, they're just defending themselves, and okay, yes, but that's an unpopular position, okay? So the second thing that they're known for is give everything to the rich and to corporations. An incredibly unpopular position, right? So maybe there's a couple of Exxon executives in the suburbs you're trying to win over, okay, but they're not gonna make up for how unpopular those positions are. So what is the actual direction you should be going towards? Because you're trying to convince people that are not already Democrats, not already on the left, to vote for you. So going further left also doesn't make sense. So wait, if you can't go towards old school Republicans, you can't go left, where do you go? Because you ignore that spectrum and you go to the populist establishment spectrum instead, and you go towards populism.
Yeah, left and right makes less and less sense every election cycle. And especially when it comes to political messaging, because while I certainly am suspicious of the economic populist message that's spouted by the likes of JD Vance, it is a popular message, right? And it's a message, especially the messaging on tariffs, the pro-tariffs messaging, that used to be a more left-wing policy. And now it's been adapted by the right wing with the Democrats kind of trashing it, even though Biden kept Trump's tariffs and expanded it. Like none of this stuff really makes sense in the old paradigm of left and right.
Yeah, and so I wanna be clear, they're all fake populists. JD Vance is a venture capitalist funded by Peter Thiel, who can't wait to give corporations the biggest tax cut they've ever seen. All of his populism's totally phony baloney. He's a giant fraud. Same for Trump. To give me everything, that's not populism. No, populism is giving to the average American, right? But having said that, is Kamala Harris a populist? Of course not even close. So JD Vance says his fake populism, Kamala has I'm gonna go after price gouging. No, she's not. But what happened? That increased her numbers because populism works. It's one of the greatest quotes of all time. It's just a rando guy who was working at a Waffle House that we interviewed in Western Virginia back in 2016 race. He said, look, we know when Trump tells us that he's gonna get the coal jobs back that he's lying, but at least he has the decency to lie to us. Whereas Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party give us no hope at all, right? So don't sit there and go, oh yeah, I'm gonna send Mark Cuban out. And again, I don't mind Mark Cuban, but sending out business leaders and billionaires all over TV saying, don't worry, big business, I'm on your side. Terrible. Saying, when she said, there's one thing I disagree with Biden on, I was like, ooh, okay, what do we got, right? Because this could be good. And she's like, I want more Republicans. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, you're missing the entire point, right? But the problem, last thing, guys, the problem is there's not a populist in the building. So they don't even know that they're missing it. So everyone around Kamala Harris, everyone in the upper echelons of the Democratic Party are establishment. And so when if a populist accidentally walked into the building and said, hey guys, I think you're misreading the moment. I think that people want you to fight for the average guy and not for the super rich donors you seem to be fighting for. They'd be like, radical, get him out of here. Did any of the donors hear him? They didn't hear him, did they? Get him out of here, get him out, right? Well, that's how you lose elections. And then you could go cry later and blame us and Russia. But we just told you how to win the election. If you'd like to do that, go for it. If not, keep going down this path, and then we're gonna be all buckled up and waiting for impact for 4 brutal years of Donald Trump.
But really, nobody makes the case against lying Kamala Harris better than Kamala herself. So Kamala just said that she can't think of one thing she'd do differently than crooked Joe Biden, right?
Well, as expected, Kamala Harris's comments on The View are coming back to haunt her as Donald Trump exploits a statement that she made about how she would do nothing differently than Joe Biden should she get elected into office as president of the United States. In fact, here's a reminder of what she said.
If anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Now Republicans are planning to use that clip in a massive ad campaign in the hopes of tying Kamala Harris to all of Biden's leadership and issues. Trump also played a clip, or the clip, at a rally in Pennsylvania yesterday for the crowds to hear in real time. One Trump ally told Axios, quote, "Expect to see this clip every single time you turn on the television between now and November 5th. And this is something that we warned about. The one thing that Kamala Harris is polling well on is that she is seen as a change candidate. That is working to her favor. And so when she ties herself to Joe Biden and says, no, I would do nothing differently, well, that's not gonna bode well for her, because she's signaling that it's gonna be a continuation of this administration, which, whether you like it or not, does not have a great approval rating and could hurt her in the election.
Yeah, look, anytime we try to warn them, they say, oh, you like Trump. No, we're trying to beat Trump, at least I am, okay? And if you wanna beat him, saying, oh, I agree with a deeply unpopular president who none of you like, and who's polling in the low 30s, they haven't polled him in a while, he might be in the upper 20s now. How does that help beat Trump? That's a really terrible answer. So, and a lot of this is Joe Biden's fault, because there's internal stories about anytime Kamala Harris distances herself from Joe Biden, Joe and Jill Biden apparently get all animated, and they're like, how dare you? He's the most important person in the world. Who cares if you lose? Who cares if Donald Trump wins? I mean, when we were running, we were losing to him by 8 points. We had no chance of winning, and we didn't care, as long as the glory of Joe Biden is appeased, right? And trumpeted. So now Kamala Harris, listening to these idiots, and remember, she adopted the Biden campaign team filled to the rim with utter morons, who were getting annihilated by Donald Trump, who has about 3 brain cells in his head. I mean, you'd never be like, it's humiliating to lose to Donald Trump, and they're getting their asses handed to them again now, again, for God's sake. And these idiots thought, oh yeah, let's be kind to Biden and say we're with the incredibly unpopular incumbent.
So I'm gonna ask you how you would have answered that question in just a minute, but let me just say, I understand that Kamala Harris is in a difficult spot when she is confronted with that kind of question, because it's not just that she used to serve in the Biden administration years ago and doesn't want to hurt his feelings. It's that she's the vice president of the Biden administration right now.
Yeah, who cares? Okay, so
how
it's a great question. So because guys, understand why it's a great question. It's easy to say that only one side of it, right? I'm not unaware that Kamala Harris has to seem like she's not too disloyal, because that will make her less likable, right? And that might depress voter turnout in some small ways, even though the Democrats that love Biden are all going to vote, and they're all going to vote for Kamala Harris. So you don't have to worry too much about that flank, but you still have to care about optics, etc., right? So the right way to answer that is, and look, I'm not saying be honest. If I was honest, I'd say I got nothing to do with that guy. Okay, I don't want anything to do with that guy at all. Here's my plans on how I'm gonna fight for you. But I know she can't do that. So here's what I would do. I would say, look, Joe Biden has been a terrific president. Look at all these amazing things that we passed. Infrastructure bill, we're gonna build bridges and roads all over the country. It's gonna create millions of jobs. And we got internet to even rural areas. So I'm so proud that I worked with Joe Biden on these wonderful accomplishments that we had. Do we have some disagreements? Of course we do. We're 2 individual human beings. We fought against each other in the 2020 primary, but he was so magnanimous in accepting me as his vice president. But I gotta tell you, so what I love about Joe Biden is he cares so much about the system and the rules and how we have to have tradition, etc. So that's why, and he comes from the Senate, that's why he respects the rules and the traditions of the Senate so much. But I'm a different person, and I don't. So when they say to me, we can't pass paid family leave, we can't pass higher minimum wage, we can't pass a public option because of the filibuster and the parliamentarian, I respect Joe Biden's position and a lot of Democrats and Republicans' position on that. But my position is, I don't care about the filibuster or the parliamentarian. I'm gonna get this done. If you have a baby in this country, you're gonna get 12 weeks off. There's no possible scenario where I let these corporations drive you back to work the day after you had a baby. It's not gonna happen, and I don't give a goddamn about the parliamentarian or a filibuster. Voting rights, we're gonna get that immediately. And I don't care if the parliamentarian thinks that people shouldn't have civil rights. We're gonna get higher wages. You know why? Because it's gotta keep up with inflation. They say, oh, the wages are causing the inflation. No, the wages are barely keeping up with inflation. I'm gonna fight for the average man. How would that answer be?
It's a good answer. I don't know if she has the capability of giving an answer like that.
Isn't that so sad?
It is sad,
that the Democrats have all of these people in the country to choose from, and they can't find one person to give that answer. Okay, you say, like, I don't know if you, like, if any of you thought, no, Cenk, that's not the right. I like Kamala's answer better.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter what you like. What matters is what the general electorate thinks and how they feel about it. And she's slipping in the polls. And so, look, if you've been paying close attention, and if you watch this show, you definitely have been paying close attention. There was a pivot at some point in her campaign where she kind of moved off of the more, economic populist messaging and tried to center her campaign on attracting the disaffected Republicans. And so she starts talking about her Glock. She starts talking about how she loves capitalism and she wants to do something for the business community. And she made the mistake that she made on The View by tying her, future agenda to that of Joe Biden's. And so what are we seeing in the polls? There's a new New York Times Siena College poll, and there is a bit of good news. Even though she said what she said on The View, it does appear that the majority of voters seem to think that she represents change. So let's take a look at that graphic. So it says, which candidate represents change more? 46% say that Kamala Harris does, 44% say that Donald Trump does. But just a note of caution, the results are within the margin of error. So Kamala Harris's lead is within the margin of error of 2.4 percentage points. But that was the first time that the Times Siena College poll where Harris had been identified as the candidate of change. Now, a Gallup poll released today found that Kamala Harris has a major lead when it comes to likability as well. That doesn't surprise me. I think that the way she carries herself definitely makes her a more likable person. Donald Trump likes to, cause conflict and all of that. So let's take a look at that. So 60% of respondents say that Harris is likable compared to 38% who said the same about Trump. More respondents also said Harris has a strong moral character and is honest and trustworthy. But Trump also has some clear advantages according to the polling. So let's take a look at the next one. So nearly 60% of respondents said Trump is a strong and decisive leader compared to 48% of voters who said the same about Harris. 61% of respondents say Trump can get things done compared to 49% for Kamala. Additionally, if we go back to the New York Times poll that I referenced earlier, 42% of respondents said Trump's policies had helped them personally, compared with 22% who said the same about Biden's policies. So again, going back to what she said on The View, she needs to move off that messaging entirely, because if you look at the polling, it indicates that a far higher percentage of Americans felt that their lives were better or benefited under Trump's policies versus Biden's policies.
All right, one of our members on Twitch, Desperado, said, how's Harris's campaign going to bounce back from this? It's not over yet. Please tell me it's not over yet. No, it's not over yet. And so, look, I might, do something different at the end of this show. Just stay tuned right here, okay? Because I've got to, apparently they're not getting it. So I've got to explain how to beat Donald Trump. And so is it still possible? Yeah, you got 25 days left. In a normal election, 25 days goes by in a blink of an eye and really doesn't make much of a difference. It's almost over by the time you're at this point, right? But in this election, 25 days is a lifetime. The lead can change 3 or 4 times still. So it's not likely that it's going to. Your usual pattern is it gets locked in around now, okay? So I'm not saying, oh yeah, don't worry, it'll go bounce back and forth. It might never bounce back, okay? But yes, it can bounce back. So look guys, the situation is dire because she's now losing not only according to the public polls, but according to private polls and other places, 6 out of 7 of the swing states.
Yeah, let's take a look at the averages.
But they're really close. So let's show you the numbers and then we'll talk about how to get back in the right direction.
So this is graphic 6. It's the Real Clear Politics average of polls. So this isn't based on one poll, and it looks at the swing states. And as you can see, Trump does have a lead in most of these swing states. It's not a giant lead, so I don't think all is lost for the Harris campaign, but it does signal that Harris is headed in a bad direction and should maybe reconsider the pivot that she has recently engaged in to attract neocons and disaffected Republicans.
So those are the average of polls, but when you look at the most recent polls, they're all trending towards Trump, including in Wisconsin. So there, she's losing in 5 out of 7 polls. As I explained last night, Mark Halperin says in his private polling, she's losing almost all the swing states. You can say, hey, Mark Halperin, I don't really trust that guy. And what do you mean private polling, et cetera? But then you look at the Democratic reaction. James Carville, David Axelrod, and others are all over TV going, we're in trouble. You don't think we won this election. We didn't win this election. We've got to work really hard. We have to be quote unquote aggressive, et cetera, because they're seeing the same numbers we're seeing. It's all trending against Kamala Harris. So whether it's 5 or 6 out of the 7 swing states is irrelevant, because if she doesn't win those states, it's over, right? And she doesn't have to win all of them, but she does have to, almost definitely has to win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. If she doesn't win those 3, she'd have to pull off a miracle upset in other places. And right now, she's losing in Michigan and Pennsylvania, and it's not trending in the right direction in Wisconsin. So it's bad. It's definitely bad. Okay, so how can you turn it around? Well, look, I can spend hours and hours talking about that, and I probably will at some point. But the things not to do. So she realized, oh wait, me bear hugging Biden didn't play well. So she goes on Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert says, what are you looking forward to doing when you get into the White House? Easiest question in the world. That should be the #1 question you prepare for whenever you're running, right? And she says, well, first of all, I'm not Joe Biden. Okay, good. I'm glad you adjusted, but it's a weird time to say that, right? What are you going to do? But wait. That would be fine by itself. The next thing she says is, and I'm not Trump.
Oh my God.
Yes, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Okay, so these are terrible answers. And then she mumbles for about a minute, and then she finally gets back around to some of her policies. What are we doing here? What are we doing? No, talk about your policies. Go populist. So here's one proposal. Again, it's symbolic, but in and of itself, this would do it. It's not too late. So she's already proposed on price gouging, the housing, and then she dropped it because business interests and donors yelled at her, right? So you need something new to energize people. Donald Trump is giving away tax cuts like he's Oprah, okay?
Yeah.
And Tyra, oh, look under your seats. You got a tax cut, you got a tax cut, right? Is he making it up? Of course he is, right? But it's effective. So you don't have to make it up. Go with paid family leave. The Republicans will have to oppose you. And then you're on the side of moms. You're on the side of a proposal that 84% of Americans want, 74% of your beloved Republicans want. Instead of saying you like Dick Cheney and Republicans, why don't you say you like paid family leave, which 3/4 of Republican voters love, okay? So that way you're appealing to the actual voters instead of appealing to these deeply unpopular people. And if you say, hey, I'm getting paid family leave passed so that every one of you, once you have a kid, you're gonna get 12 weeks off. We're the only country almost in the entire world that doesn't have it. And I'm gonna absolutely make sure that you're gonna get it no matter what. And if I don't get it, you should never reelect me, okay? That's how far I'm willing to go. We're gonna get that done, hell or high water, right? What is that gonna force the Republicans to do? Go, oh, paid family leave is bad because all their corporate donors don't want it, right? Then you've got an amazing advantage on an incredibly popular and populist proposal that is economic and helps the average American instead of the CEOs. Will they do that? Of course not. They won't do any of it. There isn't a single populist in the building. Nobody's even gonna think of it. They're gonna say, oh, what other business interests should we please? Well, that's how you lose an election.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a young Turk.